because she doesn't have power and apparently neither does her kids' school. So she's probably got to go get her kids pretty soon. But I'm going to go ahead and get sharing and we'll go through today's presentation. It's only about 25 or so slides, so we won't be on probably the full time today, but definitely we'll have time for questions afterwards. So let me pull this up and get everything started for everybody and put this in the bigger mode. Okay. So today we're going to go over the audit standard, which is a critical piece to understanding really how an auditor comes and looks at your farm and what the compliance measures are. And we like to have this as a review because if you ever have any questions, particularly you're looking through this kind of stuff on your own, the audit standard is really an important piece of information. It's almost like the dictionary to this food safety work. So understanding what's in there and how to look at it is important. And then we will briefly talk a little bit about the first scope of the audit, which is worker health and hygiene. So to get us going, there we go. Okay. So the audit standard is basically a reference document. That's how we like to think of it. It tells you each criteria, what the compliance measures are for that criteria, what the auditor will be looking for to verify or ensure that you are in compliance. It even tells you what you need to do if you're not in compliance. The basic layout of this document is kind of scary when you first look at it. There's 7 columns, and each column, has a section to it. There's a requirement number, tells you what the requirement is. There's a column for documentation, and this is where the audit standard tells you what type of document might be needed for this particular criteria. Then there's a column, really, really critical, this one, that tells you whether or not that requirement is mandatory. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. The next column talks about the procedure itself. So what is this? Column after that tells you how the auditor will verify it, and then the corrective action to be taken if the requirement is not met. So as I said earlier, the audit standard is a wonderful little document because it basically gives you all the answers to the test. That's why we really like it. The checklist is what comes along with the audit standard. This is a more simplified, streamlined document that the auditor uses when they're performing the audit. So you'll see them filling out a checklist. Some auditors will bring a paper copy. Most of them will do that still. There is, you can do it digitally if you wanted to, but usually that's not the case. The audit checklist is what is submitted to USDA as well. So that is the report. So you will see the auditor scribbling on that checklist. They are putting in comments, they're putting notes there. That is what their colleagues are going to look at when your audit is reviewed. So it looks very similar to the standard in how it's designed, but there are some columns in there that the standard doesn't have, and we'll go through those. But basically, that is where the auditor is going to check off whether you are compliant with you'll see that C, whether a corrective action is needed, that's called a CAN, whether immediate action is required, that's called an IAR. We don't like to see those. Or NA, which means that that criteria, for whatever reason, is not applicable to your operation. And then there's a big space where the auditor will write comments. Over the years, USDA has gotten more and more specific about the comments to the point that now they actually give us all every year a refresher training, and they list out for each criteria, if a comment is required, what that comment should contain. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too. But just to give you a sense of what this looks like in real life, up at the top here, you can see requirement number. So that's similar to the audit standard. Every single criteria has a number. The requirement or the criteria, what it is. This is that column, DOC, that tells you whether documentation is required. And in particular, it's going to tell you exactly what kind of documentation they're looking for. So you see here, we have under the bullets, documentation is required. WP, this means that they want to see a written policy, procedure, or a plan. So WP means that you need to have something written in your farm plan or otherwise that's going to help to identify what that criteria is asking for. R is for records. Records typically are things like logs, but a record can also be a list. For example, a record of the equipment that may touch your crop, that can be a list. And then A, assessment. This is getting to an assessment of risk. What this is really looking for is, have you identified the risks associated with this particular criteria? And in this one, there's some flexibility because it is not always required to be written. That being said, when we go through working with you guys and we do your risk assessment, we will document the entire thing. And we do that so that there's no question later on about whether or not that assessment was actually done. It also allows us to have a standing document that we can refer to from year to year as we update your documentation. The MAN column, as I said, this is mandatory. This column will have a little dot in it that identifies the mandatory criteria. And what that means is that if you are not compliant in those criteria, that will cause a failure of the audit. Not anything to worry about. We can always fix it. But just know when we work through this with you, we want to tackle those mandatory ones first, ideally that we don't have any mandatory corrective actions. And then the CAN-IAR column, again, this is where the auditor is going to check off if you're compliant, need a corrective action, or have an IAR. The IAR is very, very important. We want to avoid getting those as much as possible. An IAR is something that's considered to be very concerning, something that might cause foodborne illness like immediately or already has. Examples of IARs are when an auditor sees people leaving the restroom, not washing their hands before they go back and touch product. Another example would be dropping product on the floor, picking it back up and putting it back in the basket or moving forward with it in the process. So those are examples of IARs and are things that we never want to see. So when we talk about the audit, in particular, when you have an audit, we will be talking about scopes. There are 4 scopes in the Harmonized Gap Plus audit that may be audited. The first thing to say about scopes is that to some extent, you can pick which ones you want to do. There's a general scope. This covers worker health and hygiene, things about your bathrooms and your facilities. There's a field operations and harvesting. That's kind of self-explanatory. It's what's going on in the field, inputs, harvesting processes, and then immediate post-harvest processes. There's a much more complex and larger post-harvest operation scope, and that's really designed more for operations with more than just we harvest, we put stuff in a box and it goes out. When you have an operation that has more complex procedures related to post-harvest, that's when the post-harvest scope is useful. And then there's a logo use scope. Should you want to use the USDA GAP logo on your packaging as a marketing tool, there is actually a scope for that, and you have to be audited before you can use their logo. We'll talk about each of these in detail. The first thing I want to say, though, is that the general scope is the first scope of the audit. It is required. You cannot get away without doing that one. So everybody has to be audited on the general scope. And we're going to start with that one today because it is the biggest one. It's really probably not the hardest one to get through, but has a lot of procedures required in it that we want to cover. So first thing we want to talk about is what's in the general scope. Worker health and hygiene, as I said, this is going to cover things like hand washing, your restrooms, your injury and illness policy. We're going to talk about general record keeping and documentation because that is outlined in the general scope as well. Worker training, your operations commitment to food safety. This is a specific objective that we're going to work with you to list out in your individual farm plans. This is something that's customized to each operation, but specifically in the Harmonized Gap audit, they want to see you identify a measurable objective. Self-audit, we'll talk about that. That's pretty self-explanatory. Traceability and recall, very, very important. This one is one that has some mandatory pieces to it, and we want to make sure every year that you do a traceability and mock recall exercise. And then sampling and testing. If any sampling or testing is required in your operation, the procedures for that are going to be outlined in this general scope. So first couple things to give you a little bit more information on this food safety policy. This is a written policy. So this is where we're going to very briefly identify who's in your organization, who's responsible for food safety, and any corrective action procedures that you may have. Records and documentation. This is where we're going to be looking at how you outline what records you're keeping in your operation. And we want to make sure that we say that they will be retained for at least 2 years. That's typical language. And if you're using Heavy Connect, which is our digital record keeping system, you don't really have to worry. Those records will be automatically filed. And if you want to get rid of them after 2 years, you can do so. But you don't have to worry about keeping them in any particular order. Heavy Connect will do that for you. Worker education and training. This is a really key piece, and I bring it up because this is an area where sometimes we will see farms fail their first audit because they don't have enough worker education / training records. So you need to be able to show that if you have people working with you, they have been trained in procedures that you're using on your farm. What that means is that you really want to look at, does everybody know how to properly wash hands? Does everyone know what our cleaning and sanitizing procedure is? Does everyone know if you use gloves, what the glove policy is? These are examples. Employee training should never be really hard to do. And we have developed a series of very, very short videos to help with that. They're on our YouTube channel. So if you're at a loss for what to do for worker education and training, you can look that up. Every single video we've put together is less than 15 minutes, except for maybe one, and you can list that out as worker training. And then self-audits. These, ideally, we want to see every operation do a self-audit once a year. And self-audit, obviously, self-explanatory. It means that you do your own audit on yourself. And it's just a measure to help you get familiar with the audit standard, also to sort of check to see from your own looking at it, do you have the required documents and can you find them? Do you know where everything is? This is a really good thing to do to sort of lessen the anxiety and stress around audits. However, I will be honest and say most of our operations don't do this regularly. It is not a mandatory criteria, so you can get away without doing it. And typically it won't cause you to fail the audit, but it is something that you might want to consider getting in the habit of doing eventually. Sampling and testing. So if you have any kind of sampling that's going on or needs to happen at your operation, most commonly this is water testing. We will want to write out what that procedure is. So how you're taking the sample, the way that the lab is handling the sample. So for example, how are they doing the water quality testing? Oftentimes it will be a call alert test. These are things that we will figure out for you and write into your plan and have you just take a look at and review. So kind of simple stuff. If you're doing any soil testing, we can include that as well, but it isn't necessary unless that testing is related to food safety. Traceability and recall, this is a big one, as I mentioned earlier. So with this, we want to have a pretty well-defined traceability and recall plan. What does that mean? You guys are probably familiar with it, but when we think about traceability, the easiest way to think about it is one step forward and one step back. Using the records that you have been keeping about your procedures, particularly around harvest, you should be able to look at your records and say, okay, I can go back a step, meaning I know where this product was harvested from, what field it was in, the inputs that went into that field, when it was harvested, who harvested it, and how much I harvested. And then one step forward would be, where did it go? Did your buyer pick it up? Did you send it to your buyer yourself? That's just one step forward. What the buyer does with it afterwards is not your problem. Really, the buyer needs to take responsibility from that point forward. But with the traceability, you want to be able to identify that one step forward, one step back information. And then the recall is being able to identify to your buyer, I need to recall this particular product. Can you tell me how much of it you have? That's where the buyer should be taking over and say, okay, I've got 4 cases of the 5 that you sent me. So that's the information that you're going to want to be able to do every year. We're going to do a traceability exercise. It's essentially just a record that you're going to fill out with that information, one step forward, one step back. And then a recall is actually a mock recall. We don't have to do a real one. Hopefully that's not going to be the case ever, but we would call the buyer or email the buyer of all of your buyers. You can just pick one and say, I'm doing a mock recall. We're going to do this exercise where I sent you X number of cases of cucumbers. Tell me what you've got left. And really, these are done to just ensure that if it was a real situation, you would be able to do this successfully. There are some caveats around that. One is that we want to be able to do this trace back, trace forward in 4 hours. So we don't want it to drag on. For most of our farmers, the records are tight, the operations are small, and so this is definitely an achievable goal. 100% reconciliation. That does not mean that you need to have all of that product back to you. It means just that we need to identify that 100% of it is somewhere where we know where it is. So the buyer says, oh, I know that I sold 1 case and I have 4 in the cooler. That's 100% reconciliation if you gave them 5 cases. Pretty simple, definitely doable. And we'll work through these with you the first couple of times to make sure you understand how to do it. Lastly, corrective actions. This is just an outline of if you have a nonconformance, how are you going to deal with that? And typically what we do here is you tell us, what do you do when you have something that's out of line? And that's what we're going to put in your plan. Essentially, you're going to take corrective actions, do it within a certain amount of time. Who's responsible for it? That's really all that we're looking for there. When we talk about written policies and documentation, we're going to find that throughout the general scope, there are a number of places where this is required. One big one is for toilets, hygiene, and health. And we want to point out that this is one where we want to make sure that employees and farm visitors are aware of the policy. So when you have employees, when you have visitors coming to your farm, one of the things you should always be pointing out to them is where are the toilets and the hand washing set up. That is a key thing. And when you have your audit, that's something you're going to want to remember to do when the auditor comes. Couple of notes about farm toilets. They should be accessible, easily accessible. They should have hand washing area nearby. They should be placed somewhere where they're not going to hopefully risk any contamination of your product. So we want to see them away from the field at a distance. There's no specific distance mentioned. It's up to you to decide what that is, but use your common sense and put them somewhere where they're out of the way. And then be in compliance with applicable regulations. That means that you actually have to have a regular bathroom. So a portable Lua is fine. Makeshift things are generally not fine. The auditor in an audit will look at your bathroom. I have seen auditors go in, and one of the first things that they do is test the water to make sure that if it's a freestanding bathroom with a sink, that the water runs. If it's a Lua, like a portable Lua, and you have a hand washing setup nearby or on the side of it, they're going to test that too. But they will go in and they're going to look for a couple of things. They're going to look for soap, they're going to look for paper towels, and they're going to make sure the water runs and that it's clean. Everything in this part of the scope having to do with hygiene, toilets, injury, illness, et cetera, it's all mandatory. So this is one where we pay a lot of attention early on as we begin working with you. As I mentioned, we want to not have makeshift type things. We want to have legit toilets. That is an OSHA regulation too. A few times on farms that I've been to, I've seen some things that have been sketchy. We don't want to be in the sketchy zone when we're talking about toilets. So if you don't have a LUA, let's talk about how to get that. We don't want to see folks going into the bushes or anything else like that. Another necessary component at your farm for passing this food safety audit is clean water for drinking and also for hand washing and cleaning. We need to have that. We need to make sure that we have a document available that shows that it is clean. So we will either pull a water quality report if you are on municipal water or you are bringing water to the farm that way. If you're buying bottled water, a receipt and a label, things like that will serve as a document to show that your water is clean. If you are treating water at the farm in order to make it microbially clean to use for hand washing, then we will have some testing to do and records associated with that. Hand washing, this is a must do. It must occur after every use of the restroom, before you return to work, after eating and smoking, and anytime your hands are dirty. So this is one that seems like common sense. Sometimes, though, we have little mistakes. We've seen this happen occasionally on farms. A good example is just rinsing hands in a bucket and not actually using soap to wash them. So if that's something that you're concerned about, we're happy to talk with folks and stress the importance of this. Signage is posted that hand washing is required. This is not a mandatory criteria, but it is a best practice. If you need some signage, some templates, let us know. We actually have some signs made that we can get to you folks, really nice signs that you can hang up outside. If you want to produce your own, we have templates available too. And then if you are using or you have made a DIY hand washing station, which is very common, so that's fine. Just remember, you want to be collecting that wastewater and dump it somewhere away from your production fields. So a good example of this, when we have farms who are harvesting out in the field, they take often a DIY hand washing set with them. So, one of the containers, water containers like you would use for camping, you've got your soap, you've got your paper towels. You want to make sure that you have a bucket or something to catch and put away that trash, those paper towels that you've used. We usually just recommend getting a 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot with a lid. That can be your trash can. You're going to want to pick up a second bucket though, and that's to collect your wastewater. What we don't want to see is washing your hands using the water container on the back of the truck and having that water just free flow to the ground. You want to capture it and then go dump it somewhere away from your product. So just a quick note on that, because we have seen auditors key in on that as a corrective action. So things that you need to have for hand washing: you must have single-use towels. This can be paper towels. You can use cloth towels if you are willing to have a way to reduce cross-contamination. Typically, that means having a whole bunch of towels if you're going to use cloth towels and washing them. Pump soap for washing hands. We do not want to see just hand sanitizer. That's not an acceptable way to clean hands, because you have to have soap first and sanitizing after. So we want to see pump hand soap. Potable or microbially clean water. We don't want to be washing hands in surface water that isn't clean. A rubbish can with a lid. Again, those 5-gallon buckets from Lowe's or Home Depot work really well. You just get that lid and put that on top. And I already talked about this, but just know that the auditor will do an inspection of your hand washing areas. So they're going to go look at everything and check that the water works. We also know that for some auditors, they will at this point in time also look at your first aid kits and go through those. So if you don't have a first aid kit yet, or it's completely out of date, all the things in it are expired, use the next couple of months to fix that. DIY hand washing stations. We like to show this because we don't think that this needs to be anything fancy. Typically, you can pick all these sort of things up at your local Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace. I don't even really think that you need to build this pretty table or support structure that they show here. I usually just strap my water container to the back in the back of my pickup, and I leave it there basically until it breaks from too much sun. But this is the kind of stuff that you're going to need. So a bucket or two, the water container, you can see the pump soap on the side there. I also suggest buying a small Rubbermaid box with a lid, and that you can put your soap and your roll of paper towels in that, and that will keep everything clean and contained. So do what works best for your operation, but these are great little, I guess, DIY kits to get if you don't have something stable, or if you have fields that you need to go to that are far enough away that going back to wash hands is a little bit difficult. So okay, just a quick review of the audit documents and structure. On the checklist, there is going to be this document column, so it will again be marked with a WP, an R, or an A if a document of some kind is required. The mandatory, again, this is if the requirement is mandatory, and we want to pay special attention to those. And then the auditor will be filling in the following columns, whether it's compliant, corrective action needed, or immediate action required. Here's a look at the auditor checklist. This is just a snapshot of part of the general scope. You can tell it's the general scope because under the requirement number column, you can see everyone starts with a G. That indicates general. This is 10.6 at the top, which says toilet and wash stations shall be maintained in a clean and sanitary condition. So this is where the auditor is going to go and look to see what your bathroom looks like. There are a number of criteria throughout the audit that the auditor will have to observe in person. This is a good example of that. You can see document required here is an R. That's a record. So you are required to have a checklist that says, I have gone into my restroom and checked it any day that the farm is open, and I know that everything is working. I know that there's soap there. I know that there's paper towels. Everything is in good condition. This, as you can see, also is a mandatory criteria. So that little bullet, that little dot in the man column tells you that. And then if I'm the auditor, I'm going to go check your bathroom, going to see that you have records indicating that you've also been checking your bathroom every day. And I'm going to check off one of these columns, hopefully compliant. This one is an easy one. Doing your restroom check every day takes like 30 seconds at the most. So it's a simple one to do. A couple other things you can see here. I won't go through all of these, but just to point out in the general scope, you can get a sense of the other things that this is looking for. A response plan for your field sanitation units. So if you're using portable restrooms rental, we're going to write a quick little response plan as to what you would do if something happens, like in this heavy wind, they get blown over. You can see personnel washing their hands at any time when hands may be a source of contamination. This is another one where the auditor, in order to check this off, is going to have to observe. So they're going to be watching your processes. Signage, we talked about that. Clothing, G 10.10, clothing, including footwear, shall be effectively maintained and worn so as to protect product from risk of contamination. Basically, all that's saying is that you have folks who are coming to work with clean clothes or as relatively clean as they can be, and that's not going to contaminate your product. And then 10.11, gloves. We will be talking in depth about this one. If gloves are used, the operation shall have a glove use policy. You can see this one also is mandatory. So more on that one a little bit later on, but we're just going to pause for a moment and talk through some examples of things that might come up related to the general scope. So these are things that we've seen. First one, worker takes a tangerine to the field and eats it just before he harvests. What should be happening here? You can just call it out. You can put it in the chat, whatever you guys like. I can't actually see the chat, but I think Mia can. Any thoughts? I see something in the chat. Yay. Wash hands. Exactly. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. You should be washing hands. So it's fine to take a snack with you. Ideally, though, you're going to go wash your hands before you go harvest. Ideally, also, we don't really want to see eating and drinking in the field. If you're taking your UTV out, you're standing on the side of the field in the road, you eat your tangerine, that's technically not in the field, but you still want to wash hands afterwards. Okay, next one. Farm has a restroom, which consists of a three-sided structure with a hole in the ground inside. Mulch is available to drop in and cover waste. Hand washing is performed at the operations outdoor kitchen across the site. What are the problems with this scenario? There are many. Nobody wants to be the one to say, okay, so first thing is, oh, there we go. We got one in the chat. Yay, not near the hand wash. Yeah, that one's a big one. So having to walk all the way across the site and into an outdoor kitchen to wash hands, it's not a good situation. Who knows what types of things you might touch on the way. Could get distracted. If you have keiki and this is their situation, guaranteed, they'll lose their mind and go do something else. So having hand washing right next to the bathroom, if it's not attached or in the bathroom, having it right there is key. You just don't want to be walking all the way across your site to wash hands. The other piece of this one is that a three-sided structure with a hole in the ground inside is not an acceptable restroom. This is an OSHA violation, actually, because you have to have privacy when you are using the restroom. So a three-sided structure is not okay. The hole in the ground that you're dropping mulch in, this is also not okay. This is basically like a unregulated cesspool. So we don't want to see that. We want to see an actual bathroom, or possibly you can get away with something like a marine toilet or a composting toilet, but a legit one. This is actually not okay because this is something in this case that the operation just created on their own. So this would cause a whole bunch of problems in an audit, and it is an actual real life example. So third one, farm site does not have municipal water for cleaning and hand washing. What can the operation do? Touched on this briefly. Any ideas? Stuff going in the chat? Can't see the chat yet, so. This one could be a tough one if you haven't come across this situation. So first thing, this is common across Hawaii. We have a lot of farms that don't have access to municipal water on the farm. So the first thing that you can do is bring water to your farm. If that is going to happen, you can put that municipal water in a container. And then what we would want to do is make sure that the container is clean. Test the water supply or supply clean water. Exactly. So you can bring it, and then whatever container that you're putting it in, we want to have a process for ensuring that it stays clean. So typically we're going to add some kind of sanitizer to it to make sure that it stays clean. Second option is collect the water that is on the farm, like surface water, and we have a process for sanitizing that. A little bit harder to do there sometimes, depending on what the quality of the surface water is, but it is possible. So we can handle situations where we don't have clean water actually at the farm. There's just a few extra steps that we need to take. Okay, last one. Visitors come to the farm for a tour. When they arrive, what do you need to tell them? That one was much easier. Show them the restroom and the hand washing station. Exactly. That's the first thing you want to do, is let people know where those two things are. And then in addition to that, you might also want to let them know if you have any special rules, like kids are not allowed in the packing house, or we don't allow pets, or we do allow pets, but they have to be leashed. So anything like that, whatever your specific rules are, those are the things you would want to say. But exactly that, hand washing and restroom location are key. Okay, so some things for you guys just to think about now that we've gone through this first part of the general scope. What are your operations restroom facilities like? Do you need to make any changes? Do you need to create a DIY hand washing station, for example, to take with you to the field? So just some things for you guys to think about. No need to answer right now. Do you need signs? If you do, please let us know, because we have a lot and they're in a storage container and we want to get rid of them, give them to you guys. So let us know if you need any signage. One other thing to think about is, where does rubbish go? There is a question or two on the audit scope about trash. And so what we're going to want to do is ask you, what is your procedure for collecting trash at the farm? And if, for example, there's collection, we want to identify when that is and how often. If you take it to your local refuse station, what is your procedure for that? Do you do it on a regular basis? Do you wait till the container gets full? Simple things like that. And then just give some thought to anywhere where you might be able to improve. Those are things that we always want to see as we embark on this. We never want it to be static. We want to make sure that we're always looking for areas that we can improve. Okay, we're going to quickly go through the next couple of things here. And these are just some basic reminders that are part of the general scope. So smoking, eating, and drinking, touched on this briefly. This should be happening in designated areas and not in produce handling areas, including the field. So as I said, don't want to be eating your tangerines in the field. You want to be off to the side. Ideally, you want to have a break area that you can use for this. So eating and drinking and breaks should happen in one designated spot. Smoking, if you allow it at your operation, should be in its own spot. And the ideal situation is to have one of those little containers that you capture ash in. So we don't want to see that flicking all over the place either. These are mandatory, and we have to have a written policy. So we will ask you, where's your break area? What is it like? It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can actually just have a tent with a picnic table under it. If you want to get fancy, here's some ideas. This was from a farm in Kahuku. This is actually just a 3-sided shed, and they happened to get a hold of some lockers. They've got one table, 2 chairs, and what this does that's nice is it gives them the opportunity to have wall space to hang up their pesticide safety signs, their emergency phone numbers, and things like that. Again, though, you don't have to create the Cadillac. It can be much simpler than that. So in addition to thinking about your restroom and hand washing facilities, you want to be thinking about, do you have those designated smoking area and break area, or eating and drinking areas? Are they clearly identifiable? Do you need to put up a sign? Are they located away from the produce handling? Do you allow smoking at your operation? If you're not sure, or there's no clear specific policy, now's the time to think about creating one. And if you're going to change anything, let's work on that as we create your farm plan. An example of what that is going to look like as we write out your farm plan. Here's just a quick one from one of our participating farms. Some of this language will be pretty similar across the board for each operation. In some places, though, there will be customized specific language. So visitor policy, this is one where we're going to lay out here. Again, you can see number 1, instruction on the location of toilet and hand washing facilities. And then it might be more specific. You don't have to have a lot of things. It's just, what are your rules when people come to your farm? Then hand washing and toilet facilities, we're going to lay that out. So we are going to ask you, what is the situation on your farm? Do you have hand washing and restrooms? Do you have a LUA? We're going to lay that all out in the plan. And the idea behind this is that we want the auditor to be able to look at this farm plan of yours and get a really good sense of what your operation is like before they even set foot on the farm. And the reason for that is, 1, We want to make sure that they have as much information as they can before they come so that they're prepared. And two, so that when they come to do your audit, the less time they're there, the better, right? We want them to be able to fill out a lot of this checklist ahead of time and really spend their time on your farm very targeted. And again, another look at a checklist. So with respect to what we see, first of all, again, there's that mandatory circle. So we want to make sure that those things are definitely taken care of. You can see in this one, though, we have auditor comments. And remember, I said they're going to be writing comments as they're going through your audit. So this is something where we want to stress, don't be alarmed by that. There are comments that they have to put in. And so you can see G9.1, here's a good example. They are going to write, when is the most recent self-audit done? And is there anything else that they got to put in there, like corrective actions? G10.2, down here at the bottom, the visitor policy is posted on the door and was pointed out to the visitors. So these are the types of little comments that you'll see. If you look at G10.1, you'll see this one requires a written policy, and the auditor here has noted where the policy was found. So so-and-so's farm plan in this section. So this is tying, hopefully, all of this together. What we, again, want to do is create a written document that is very, very easy for an auditor to go through all of this checklist at the same time and knock it off. So record keeping for this part of the audit, for this scope, couple things to repeat. Worker training, really, really important. Farm workers need to be trained on a number of things. Health and sanitation procedures, including hand washing, is a big one. So you want to just make sure that you have documented, that you've gone over with your employees, here's how you wash hands, here's how often. Maybe you want to cover the injury and illness policy as well. One thing that we like to suggest is doing a hand washing demo, because it's really easy, it's interactive, and you can just knock everybody out at once and make sure that they all understand how hand washing should happen. Microbially clean water. So we want to know what the water source is at the farm and if there is microbially clean water available for drinking and hand washing. We want to make sure that we have a document that shows what that is, so, or where that's from. So if you have municipal water at your site, just let us know that, and we will pull up the Board of Water Supply report and we'll file that as the documentation. If you are bringing water, we'll do the same thing. If you are creating clean water at your site, we'll walk through what's required for that. But there will be some testing that we're going to want to do to make sure that whatever sanitizing that you're using is effective. And then restroom cleaning log, we talked about this earlier, very simple. Every day that you're at the farm, you're going to want to use that restroom cleaning log in Heavy Connect to just mark off, yes, everything is good. Or if you need to put a note like, oh, our soap is running low, I have to get more. So just make sure that you get in the habit of doing those records. Okay, so speaking of Heavy Connect, we're getting down here to the end of our slides today, but before we head out, I want to show you guys a harvest log demo. This is what Ingrid wanted to do last week, but couldn't get the phone to mirror. So instead, we went ahead and taped ourselves doing it, recorded ourselves doing it, and we're going to watch that really quickly. After that, we'll come back to this slide and talk a little bit about Heavy Connect and see if there's any questions. But this is a short video. It's about 2 minutes. I might pause it here and there just to kind of give you guys a sense of what's happening. So I'm going to start it. This is on the phone. So just remember your Heavy Connect app is on your phone. We're not doing records on the dashboard in the laptop or computer. Hopefully you guys can see this. There is no sound. So she's going to the field scope and she's going to pull up the harvest log. And then the first thing she's going to do is put the date. So there's a calendar here. You can pull up the date easily, confirm it, and then hit the green button. Then we're going to identify what have we cleaned and sanitized, right? So in your harvest log, you're going to be putting in some information about things you did besides harvest. So what did you clean? What was the method? Again, these are all things that we're going to populate here so that you can just use a drop down. and your sanitizing method as well. That's what she's selecting here. Now she's moving on to the pre-harvest assessment. So again, this is just a check yes or no to each of these questions. You can see as she does that along the side, each little bar is turning green. So make sure with this that you're reading the question and then answering it. If you get a different color besides green, go back and make sure you read the question correctly. But these are just the simple checklist questions that we want to see and that are required for the audit for every harvest. Once you've done that, then we're going to go to what crop did you harvest? So again, the drop down, we're going to select cucumber in this case, from where. So we're going to put that information in your Heavy Connect for you as well. And then how much, your quantity. So this is a number, obviously. You're going to fill out pounds of cucumber harvested, and you're going to hit the green button for save. In this case, she went to the comments too real quick there, so you can use that little paper plus on the side to put a comment in if there's something you want to say or note. The next section is a wash pack checklist. So this is similar to the pre-harvest checklist, but it's during your wash pack process. So first question is harvested product has been inspected, and then it's going to ask about your cleaning. Did you walk through and make sure there were no slugs, things like that around? Did you separate any non-conforming product? And that's it. That's all your harvest log is going to be. Very, very simple. You're going to put your signature and then you're going to finish. Okay, now I'm going to try to go back. Okay, so let's take a second here to just see, are there any questions about that Heavy Connect log? I know it goes kind of fast. Everybody feel comfortable with it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I logged into it. It doesn't seem like I can get anywhere though. Is it not set up yet?
I don't know. It should be. When you log in, what do you see? Okay. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Oh, I can't. Okay, maybe yeah, yours might need, we might need to go check yours. I will work on that. So when you do log into it, you should see the different scopes on the side. And so you would choose general, field, post-harvest, depending on what your record is. You're not seeing that.
No.
Okay. The other thing that you can do before we go too crazy with it, there's a little arrow with a circle kind of on the top right, which is your refresh or sync. Hit that and just see if you see anything different. No? Okay. Okay. Mia, do you are you able to get in and see what Max can see?
I can try to help him. Have you tried logging in on your computer? Because the app version is a little bit different from the website version. Um, the website is a lot more broader. But this is what you guys should see as soon as you log in. So it says like general.
Yeah, you see how and then when you hit the little green button down in the lower right, then your different records will pop up.
Yeah.
But if you're not seeing that, we can work with you each individually to make sure that we figure that out. Once we get it all set up, it's very, very simple to use. Any other questions while we're working on that? Anybody else having a similar problem, or is anybody else getting in and it looks like the records are visible and everything is good? Okay. All right. I'm gonna hit back to where we were real quick, and then we'll finish this up and then go back. So if you haven't logged into your Heavy Connect app on the phone yet, get in there. Also, maybe check your dashboard as well, and then reach out to me, your food safety lead or Mia, any of us, to let us know, and we will set up a time to get with you individually to work through that. When you do, as I said, when you do turn on Heavy Connect, if you ever have issues with it, one of the first things you want to do is hit that sync button just to see. Occasionally there's an update, and you want to make sure that you're synced up so that everything works, especially if we've made changes in your account. Once you get in there, you should work through a couple of logs, get familiar at least with the restroom log. That one's really, really simple. Go ahead and look at the harvest log. You can look at any of them. If there's anything you're just playing around in there and you want us to delete it later, we can definitely do that. But this is something that we want to get you folks starting on now so that you start to get more and more familiar with it. And don't be afraid that you're going to mess anything up, because you won't. We can fix it if you do, but you're probably not going to mess anything up. As far as homework stuff, we want to make sure that you're still working on that. We have a little bit longer to complete the questions under the general scope, which is numbers 1 through 23 by next week. And then we'll start working on the field scope questions to be completed by the early part of March. Couple other things that we will be reaching out to you about, sampling and testing. So is there any testing required for your operation? If you're strictly on municipal water, then we don't need to do any testing. Again, we will pull the Board of Water Supply reports. If you're using surface water for irrigation, we may need to do some testing. That will typically be quarterly. And we have a couple of different lab options that will help you connect with. If you're doing the post-harvest scope, or even if you're not doing it, but your post-harvest process includes the use of sanitizers, we may need to do some sampling there as well. So this will be on a one-on-one basis, figuring this out with each of you, depending on your operation. And then, of course, keep working in Heavy Connect. That's a must-have. So I'm going to stop sharing, though, and go back. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, about the questionnaire that we were sent out, does that automatically share with you, or do we have to uh
That's automatically shared with us.
okay.
I believe that's the beauty of using the Google Drive stuff. So we should have access to that. Yeah, that way we don't have to bug you guys like, oh, send me that version, send me this version. We can see it. Yeah. Yeah, Max.
My laptop Heavy Connect doesn't really look like the screen you shared either.
Oh, okay. All right. I tell you what, we are gonna connect with you on Zoom and see if we can figure this out.
I'll try to log into your account after this and then email you if I can figure it out.
Do I have to log in for that? I mean, log out, sorry.
No, no, you don't have to log out. It'll handle multiple accounts logging into it.
We also have on our end, we have what's called a super user that allows us to get into each account if we need to make changes to the drop down, things like that. So Heavy Connect is really versatile, which is one of the reasons we really like it. So we will figure it out though, Max. Do not worry. Those guys are a really good team too. So if we do have serious issues that we can't figure out, they're very responsive. Anybody else? Questions? Heavy Connect questions? Other questions? So far, so good. How is the frequency going for you guys? Meeting twice a week? Okay, good. Awesome. Glad to hear that, because we used to do this once a week and it dragged on for like 10 weeks. And we thought this would probably be a little bit better if we did it twice a week and just got it over with. So appreciate that feedback. Thank you guys. All right, well, I'm going to stop the recording and